against trans people on social media, hypothetically,
Right.
without and so they warned me and told me to stop repeating my statement that I wouldn't use these gender neutral pronouns. The reason they did that was because they reviewed the policies and concluded the same thing I concluded, which was that what I was doing was illegal. And you see, the legislation is written, and this is a real cute element of it. This is something really quite wonderful. If you're an employer in Ontario now, you are as responsible for your employees' acts of speaking as they are. And you're responsible for the consequences of their speech acts, whether they're intentional or unintentional, and whether or not a complaint has been made. So you're responsible for whatever your employees say, even if you don't know about it, even if no one complains, even if it was accidental.
Man, I mean,
So,
there's so much here. So wait, let's just pause for a second because it warrants to mention that you are a tenured professor, which
yeah.
means that they can't fire you just for no reason. I think to even is it even ever possible to fire a tenured professor? They'd have to
Oh yeah,
probably
you can do it the way they're planning. They're planning at least to open that up as a possibility. The way you do that is the same way you discipline any employee. You send them a warning letter outlining what they're doing wrong and telling them to stop doing it. Oh, and when they wrote the first letter, they mischaracterized what I said quite badly, and I challenged them on that and told them that they should go and rewrite the letter and do it properly if they were going to come after me. But they refused my refusal, and so I kept the letter. And I got another letter on the 18th, and it was a real masterpiece of doublespeak because they repeated their claims that they had received, many letters, which I'm sure they had from people within the university. But I knew at that point that they'd already also received at least 500 letters from people supporting me because I was CC'd on the letters, as well as a petition that was signed by 10,000 people. They never even mentioned that, and they
Mhm.
said that I had to stop. They told me I had to bring my behavior in line with university policy and stop repeating the claim that I wouldn't use gender neutral pronouns. And one of the things that was really absurd about that is, so I was accused of violating university policy, but their own policy drafted in 1992, which is their policy on freedom of speech, states outright that at the university, freedom of speech is the highest value, and the professors not only have the right, but the obligation to engage in the criticism of the university and society at large. So it was hypocritical to the nth degree. And then even we're having a debate at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday. It's going to be live cast on my YouTube channel, Jordan Peterson Videos. The university, I proposed that the university hold a debate about these issues, and they actually agreed. Although they told me, and this really put my tail in a knot because I didn't know what to do about it. They told me that they'd go ahead with the debate, but that I couldn't repeat my insistence that I wouldn't use gender neutral pronouns in the free speech debate.
So
Right.
wait. So let's just get this straight. They allowed you to go ahead and do this. Okay, that sounds
Yeah.
good. But then the condition was that you actually could not repeat the very things that got this whole mess going in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So I came home after that, and I wasn't sure what to do because I thought, well, first of all, it took me a while just to it was like being in a Delhi painting. It's so surreal, I thought, oh, this is interesting. We're going to have a free speech debate with a restriction on free speech implicit in the debate. So I thought, well, I don't know what the hell to do about this. So I called a few theaters, and because I thought, well, to hell with it, I'll just do this by myself. But then, and I talked to my family. My parents were visiting, and I talked to my son and my wife, and we talked about this a lot. And I wrote the university a letter, and I said, look, I'm not sure I can do this. This is absurd. Here's a better idea. Here's a better idea. You guys are making a mistake. You're supporting the wrong horse. You're backing the wrong horse. So why don't you do this instead? Why don't you come out in favor of my right to freedom of speech, regardless of whether you agree with me? Put your legal department behind protecting me, instead of threatening me essentially with the loss of my job, which is what they're fundamentally doing. And we'll fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. And so I went and talked to the dean who helped arrange the debate, and he said, there's no way the university will do that. And so I made another video saying all that and posted it online. I guess about 60,000 people watched that. But I decided to go ahead with the debate. And there were two reasons for that. One was I know that it's very difficult for anything to happen without it being imperfect. And often the price you pay for moving ahead with something is to accept its imperfections, like the snake in the Garden of Eden. there's always a snake in the damn garden. And so I thought this was the snake. And I thought, well, I thought it would be better to have the debate under university auspices than for me to go it alone, partly because the university should be hosting this debate, and partly because I also couldn't see, this was a secondary concern, but I also couldn't see any way out of the conundrum where I didn't lose. So if I refused the debate, then what would have happened was the university would have said, well, we offered in good faith and Peterson rejected it. And all the people that I would have hypothetically debate would have said, oh, well, he just had an excuse, and, you know, and he just took whatever excuse was open to him so that he didn't have to face us. Mm-hmm. So anyways, for better or worse, the debate's on at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday. So, and I think tickets go on sale tomorrow, but it will be live cast.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'll be sure to promote that. Absolutely. I'm curious, what kind of support or not support have you gotten from other academics? It sounds like the University of Toronto is not really on board what you're doing, but what about from academics?
Oh, none.
Nothing.
None to speak of. Now, the Society for Academic Freedom in Halifax came out and supported me. And they're a decent organization, although they don't really have any teeth. But that's not their fault. I mean, they're doing their best. But the silence from my faculty colleagues, apart from the 200 who wrote a letter denouncing me, and didn't have enough courage to mention that it was actually me they were denouncing, even though when they sent the letter to the Varsity, which is the University of Toronto newspaper, they said it was about me, which I thought was really funny.
Wait, so when they write a letter about you,
yeah,
how many of them do you think actually believe the content of what they're saying? Like really believe that you should be silenced, versus that the inmates are sort of running the asylum at colleges now, and that these other professors are really just protecting their own ass because they don't want the mob to come after them. Yeah, I'm not saying that's any better, by the way, of course.
I wouldn't. No. I wouldn't say that the people who denounced me did it to protect themselves, although there would have been an element of that. But certainly many of the people who are remaining silent are doing that to protect themselves. I mean, I had a colleague tell me, it was actually one of the reasons I made the video. I had a colleague say, who's you know, been on the receiving end of some political correctness. He said, well, I won't do anything about it because the cost to me would be near infinite and the social consequences would be zero. Mm-hmm. But that's always how these situations work out. And that's why people remain silent. And remaining silent is the worst thing, that you abdicate your privileges as a citizen when you remain silent. You no longer deserve to partake of the freedoms of a citizen. But people will give up their right to, they'll give up the rights at the drop of a hat. And the silence from my faculty colleagues has been absolutely deafening.
Yeah, and you know, it's very, go ahead.
Well, it's no different than, I mean, I don't like to make this comparison, but there was no courage on the part of the intellectuals when the Soviets started to dismantle universities. There was no courage among the academics when the Nazis started to do the same thing in the 1930s. And it's the same process. I mean, I'm not trying to draw a direct equivalent, but it's the same process. It requires almost no pressure to intimidate people into silence. But that's because people aren't afraid enough. You know, people have been asking me how I can tolerate the stress. It's like, first of all, compared to real stress, a sick child, that's stressful. Mm-hmm. This is a political argument. What's on the line is my job. Like, that's not a tragedy. It sucks and it's stressful, but I mean, compared to genuine stress, it's nothing. But compared to the stress that I would be under if I agreed to use this language, see, for me, the real issue for me personally is that I believe that these made-up gender-neutral pronouns are part of the radical dialectic of the PC authoritarian left. I think they're carefully crafted terms. I think they have intent behind them, and they're part and parcel of an ideology. And I dread and despise that ideology to the bottom of my soul. And there's not a chance I'm going to use those words because I would literally destroy my integrity. And I'm not doing that. I'd rather, I can't think of anything that would be worse for me than that. It would break me.
Yeah, and you know, look, I love that passion, and it's so obvious how personal this is to you. I'm curious, what do you think is it about you that is willing to put this. I get what you're saying. It would hurt you to your core, but I just mean, like, what about your maybe formative years or something that you're the one that's putting yourself on the line for this? And I know there are a couple of there. There's my friend Gad Sad, who I know you've talked to, who's in academia in Canada. Who talks about this stuff. And I know I have a few allies in the United States really protecting free speech. And then they're growing, by the way, which is why so many people wanted me to talk to you. But what do you think really is it about you that makes you say, I will put my ass on the line for this?
Well, I published a book in 1999 called Maps of Meaning. And the course lectures about that are on my video channel. And I wrote Maps of Meaning because I was absolutely obsessed with what had happened in Nazi Germany and in the Soviet Union. And I mean, I really, truly mean obsessed. I spent virtually every waking second for 15 years thinking about nothing else than that, and read very, very, very widely. I read all of Carl Jung. I read Orwell and Huxley and Solzhenitsyn and a slew of books on neurobiology and all the great clinical psychologists and a huge chunk of political economy. And I read a very, very vast amount of psychological and political literature. And I synthesized this over the course of 15,000 hours. That's how long it took me to write that book. And the reason I did it was because I was trying to understand the relationship between belief and emotion and motivation. And more specifically, I'll tell you a story. Here's what I was trying to understand, all right? So one of the tricks that the guards used to pull in Auschwitz was that when the prisoners or the detainees were dumped off the rail cars where they'd been packed in like sheep, worse than sheep, and where many of them died of suffocation and dehydration and overheating, when they were dumped off at the camp, and they were ruined by then already because they'd been ripped away from their families and had their lives destroyed. But that wasn't good enough for the Auschwitz guards. And one of the tricks they used to pull on them was they'd have the inmates pick up a 100-pound sack of wet salt and carry it from one side of the compound to the other, and then back. And so it said on the Auschwitz gates, "Work will make you free," which was a joke, a black joke, a joke from the depths of hell, that like mutual assured destruction, the same kind of humor. And I was very interested in, I thought, okay, an Auschwitz guard could take someone who was already ruined, who'd lost their family, was suffering dreadfully, and then make them do something effortful and terrible. Because these camps were big. To carry the sack of salt from one side, that's a city. These were cities. These weren't like little prisons. And it was to demonstrate to the person their absolute abject humiliation and to deprive them of any sense of accomplishment whatsoever that they might extract from their labor. Okay, so I was interested in that, but I was interested in why a human being would do that to another human being. But I was interested in that in a very particular way, because you see, the people in Auschwitz who were the guards, they were ordinary people. And that meant that ordinary people can do that. And that meant I could do it. And so I wanted to figure out just exactly what that meant. And so I did figure out what that meant. Jung said that the human shadow stretches all the way down to hell. And that's exactly right. It's really directly true. And so I realized that when I was writing Maps of Meaning, after some experiences I had also visited is more the accurate term, but I worked for this strange psychologist in Edmonton who was the prison psychologist at the Edmonton Maximum Security Prison. And I went out there a few times and observed the convicts and started thinking about what motivated them too. And, I had a revelation not long after that about atrocity. And the revelation was, because I didn't think I was capable of doing such a thing, but I thought about it a long time and I realized I was bloody fully capable of it. And so then I started to puzzle out, given the human capacity to do that, and maybe even to revel in it, maybe even to enjoy it, what can possibly be done? And people often perform that sort of atrocity under the guise of ideological commitment. Well, I'm persecuting the Jews because I'm actually a really good guy. Here's what I want. Here's my good intentions.
Right.
Here's my good intentions, and they just happen to be collateral damage. And so it's actually moral and ethical that I'm doing this. But really, they're just taking the opportunity to act out their deep hatred of being and hatred of reality and contempt for humanity. Well, I wrote Maps of Meaning in an attempt to understand that motivation and to determine what people could do so that if the opportunity arose once again, each individual would not choose to be an Auschwitz camp guard.
So, what do you think? And I would welcome everyone. We'll put the link to it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best way to extricate yourself from that type of thinking? What's the best way to insulate yourself so that when the day comes and you are faced with some horrific choice, that you don't jump in with the collective? And the Nazi guards, of course, the phrase that they always said was, "Well, I was just following orders," but orders allowed them to do absolutely horrific things. So what can we all do to make sure that as the choices come to us, whatever they may be, that we don't do the horrible thing?
Well, a lot of people have thought through this. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he came to a particular conclusion, and so did Dostoevsky, so did Alexander Solzhenitsyn, so did Václav Havel, who was the dissident, Czech dissident, who eventually became president. They all said the same thing. Those systems exist because people lie, and the way you fight them is you don't lie. You don't lie about anything ever. And so that's what you do. And you think, well, how can that make a difference? Well, Solzhenitsyn wrote the Gulag Archipelago in the 1970s, and he detailed the transformation of the Marxist philosophical doctrine into the murderous legislation that killed perhaps 50 million people in the Soviet Union between 1919 and 1959. Said the entire society was pervaded by lies. Well, 1/3 of the people were government informers. You could never say anything that you believe to be true. And it doesn't start by people directly lying. It starts by people muffling themselves because there are certain things you can no longer say. Mm-hmm. And you demolish your character, you weaken your character but through sins of omission. And you get weak. And as soon as you're weak, people can manipulate you like mad. And so the way you fight back against totalitarianism is that you tell the truth and you act out the truth, your truth, and you subject yourself to correction from other people, because the truth is a process, right? It's a process of successive approximation. And that's far more powerful than anything else you can do.
It's interesting. I'm curious, do you think people, the average person, is actually starving for truth? Really, I don't mean like human truth of the origins of the universe, although many of us are, but I mean just simple truths about how our politicians operate, how our lives operate, our day-to-day truths. Because I find all the time people will email me and say, it's so great what you're doing and free speech and all this stuff, and my response to everybody is, I don't think I'm doing anything that great other than telling the truth the way I see it. I'm trying to use logic and reason to talk to people I find interesting, to learn and expand my knowledge. And that's my quest for truth. And I think people have been so dumbed down that they're almost afraid of finding it because the system has just rewarded idiocy in a way.
Yeah, well, people, it says in the New Testament that man does not live by bread alone. And that's a technical commentary on the utility of the truth. The truth is, you could say, spiritual food. And I use that metaphor purposefully. You live on information. You're a cognitive apparatus. You live on information, and in information you transform information into the tools you use to operate within the world. And if your tools are faulty, then your life will be terrible. If you're fed on a diet of deceit, then you'll be pathological in everything you do, and the world will kick back at you extraordinarily hard. The first thing it'll do is deprive you of any sense of meaning. And then it'll make you bitter, and then it'll make you resentful, and then it'll make you murderous, and then it'll make you genocidal. That's the developmental pathway. And those kids, the people who shoot up the high schools, they've already hit murderous. They're nigh on the way to genocidal. And part of the reason is that a life that's characterized by nothing but deceit has no positive meaning in it, but plenty of suffering. Because you can lie to yourself and you can lie to other people, but the probability that you're going to be able to talk yourself out of your terror and pain is zero. And as far as I can tell, truth is the only genuine antidote to suffering, because getting rid of suffering, that isn't going to happen. The only thing you can do is live in a manner that enables you to withstand suffering without becoming corrupt. And that means that you live by the truth, and no matter what. And then there's a coda that goes along with that, which is something that took me decades to understand, is that Kierkegaard talked about this a fair bit when he talked about the the leap of faith necessary for true religious belief, said telling the truth is it's a gamble on the benevolence of being. So the idea is, well, you tell the truth. You don't manipulate the world to make it give you what you want. You just say what you try to articulate yourself and articulate the manner of your being as clearly and comprehensively as possible. And then you see what happens. And you decide, this is the act of faith, you decide that no matter what happens, if you tell the truth, that that's the best possible outcome. And the thing is that at the bottom of your being, there's always a decision that has to be made about how you're going to interact in the world. Because you have free choice, whatever that means, you seem to have it. And so you have to make a decision about how it is that you're going to act in the world. And you act in truth if you can. That's the pathway out of the kind of misery that makes people bitter and far worse than bitter.
Yeah, well, it's incredibly obvious to me that you're living in your truth, and because you're doing that, you're waking up a lot of other people, which is why so many people wanted me to talk to you. So, what do you think? This will be the final question. Yeah. What do you think is the best way to, if for all the people that are watching this right now, that understand this, that hear you, that understand the passion, that want to live that way too, how can they get involved in this process? Is it simply just doing?
No, I can tell you. Yeah, I can tell you. All right, so. Most of your viewers will have watched Pinocchio.
Probably.
There's a scene in Pinocchio where Geppetto wishes on a star. Right? And what it means is he lifts up his eyes beyond the horizon to something transcendent, to something ultimate, because that's what a star is. It's part of the eternity of the night sky. And so he lifts his eyes up above his daily concerns and he says, what I want What I want more than anything else is that my creation will become a genuine individual, right? It's a heroic gesture because it's so unlikely, and that catalyzes the puppet's transformation into a real being, and we start as puppets. And so the trick is to get rid of your goddamn strings. And you remember in Pinocchio, he faces a lot of temptations. One is to be a liar. The other is to be a neurotic victim. That's how he ends up in Pleasure Island, where he just about gets sold into the salt mines, turns into a brain jackass and sold to the salt mines because it's run by authoritarians. Well, okay, so what you do is you lift up your eyes and you say, look, I would like being to progress in the best possible manner. And that's best for me, best for my family, best for society, maybe best for the world. Simultaneously, I would like to attain that. Whatever that is, that's what I want. You commit to that. Then you tell the truth. And then you can tell if you're telling the truth. You can tell it physiologically. And so this is something to learn. You watch what you say, and you will find out that some things you say make you come apart. They make you fall apart, and you can feel it. It's physiologically. It's centered in your solar plexus. It's a feeling of chaotic weakness and dissolution. It's a sense of self-betrayal. And then if you tell the truth, that pulls you together and strengthens you. And so you can learn to feel when your words are accurately articulating yourself. And then you practice that. And that makes you into the sort of person that won't be an Auschwitz guard, that won't play ideological games, that won't sacrifice other people to their expediency. And that's what you have to do. And that's really the core idea in Western civilization, is to build yourself into a forthright individual who's capable of telling the truth and capable of bearing the responsibilities of citizenry. And that's what people have to do.
Well, Jordan, you've eloquently and passionately spoke about so many of the things that I care about and so many of the things that I've tried to live my life for. And you've also partly renewed my spirit to keep doing those things. And I think you've given a little bit of that star to a lot of the people that were wondering, where the hell is everybody on this?
So recently you may have seen a slew of articles in the mainstream media comparing the arch-villain of The Walking Dead, Negan, to, of course, Donald Trump. Now, these articles have really annoyed me, but not because I particularly want to defend Trump. In fact, part of my annoyance is coming from the fact that I have to defend Trump, because these people are fucking stupid. They are so stupid in the most infuriating ways because they have filtered their perception through the lens of their ideology and managed to get the situation exactly backwards. I'll show you what I mean. This comparison seems to have originated from actors on The Walking Dead themselves, and the progressive press have just picked up this narrative and run with it as if it's a gift from God. The actor who played Abraham said, "Negan's a little bit of a loose cannon, and Trump is a little bit of a loose cannon." And that's not me being political, that's by his own description. So yeah, I think we actually have our Negan and our Rick. To call Negan a little bit of a loose cannon is to understate the situation so severely it's almost like this actor forgot that Negan bludgeoned his character to death in front of the group while they were all helpless and mushed his head into a paste on the floor with a baseball bat. He's not just a little bit of a loose cannon. They say the comparison feels even more relevant following Season 7's 85-minute fourth episode, Service, which centered around Negan's first visit to Alexandria as part of his arrangement with Rick and the group. Negan, introducing himself by banging his barbed wire-covered baseball bat against the walls of Alexandria, immediately shows he isn't gracious in victory after essentially emasculating Rick and the Premier. Yes, that's the point, and that's why I'm not really a big fan of Negan as a character, to be honest. He is so sociopathically unhinged that you simply don't know if he's going to kill someone at any given time, as it seems he might have the capacity for it. Negan is a violent psychopath, a warlord, who rules by fear. To say that Donald Trump is anything like this character is, at best, highly uncharitable, and at worst, utterly unfair, because he has yet to even assume the office. To the best of anyone's knowledge, Donald Trump has not killed anyone. He has not done it joyfully to watch the suffering of others and break them. Good lord, and we've only just started. But he isn't just like Trump in his lack of humility. Negan's a demagogue, offering members of the Saviors the chance to move up in his inner circle with a point system that's like a post-apocalyptic rundown of The Apprentice. Oh, brilliant comparison. Marvellous. You had to shoehorn that in, didn't you? I love that the implication is that the premise of this is that every other politician doesn't do exactly the same thing. Anyone who achieves any kind of power rewards those who help them gain the power. Otherwise, there's no incentive for anyone to help you. Every single politician does this. This is not in any way unique to Donald Trump, or even indicative that he might be some kind of evil warlord. Hillary does the same thing, Obama did the same thing, everyone does this. You have to do this. This is the nature of power. Trump has also suggested torture as well as killing terrorists' families. Negan gleefully bashes people's skulls in with a baseball bat and plays Easy Street on an endless loop to deprive you of sleep. Yes, these are directly comparable. This is exactly the same thing. There is absolutely no difference here. And I just want to point out, Hillary knew her no-fly zone would kill Syrian civilians. So at the very least, Trump is trying to get those people most directly connected to the terrorists. And he didn't say kill them, he just said go after them. Admittedly, yes, that probably does mean kill them, but at least he's not being as explicit, and there is some wriggle room there. Whereas Hillary out and out said that this would kill Syrians. She just said it. And since we're on the subject, the US has been torturing people for decades. Since Bush implemented waterboarding, and the CIA started outsourcing its torture to various Middle Eastern dictatorships. But you know, Trump is the villain here because he said, yeah, we could waterboard some people. I mean, why wouldn't he? It's not out of character for the United States to do this. But do you know what we haven't brushed on yet? That's right, identity politics. How about the Daily Beast's Melissa Leon explain to us how Negan has a twisted relationship with women and a narrow-minded understanding of rape. He offers women the chance to be his wife in exchange for the benefits of being under his protection. Yeah, it's bizarre that Negan is in any way concerned about sexual consent in the apocalypse, isn't it? It's really bizarre because you'd think the writers would know that you could build Negan up into a bigger villain if you had him not caring about sexual consent. But again, the answer for this I think is revealed in the previous paragraph. However, perhaps it's Negan's views on women that are most comparable and horrifying. Really, that's more horrifying than smashing people's heads in with baseball bats, is it? Because that he is a misogynist is worse than him being a psychotic murderer. Don't you think your principles are a bit misaligned when you think that's the case? And I am serious when I say that these people seem to have deeply misaligned principles, as this article in Forbes will show us. I was excited about the prospects for the South, episode 703 of The Walking Dead. I figured after last week's tangent we'd get back to the central issue of how Negan will affect the season's story arc. I have to say, I ended the hour more than a little disappointed when The Walking Dead's new villain started acting more and more like a certain presidential candidate. Personally, I have no idea how he's making this comparison, because in this episode we get to find out about Negan's second-in-command and how he horribly scarred his face, and Negan's second-in-command's continued torture of Daryl, and then Negan's constant attempts to break Daryl to turn him into a kind of Theon Greyjoy / Reek style character. I have no idea what they think Donald Trump has done to resemble this, and they don't tell us. Unsurprisingly, because, like I said, I mean, Donald Trump is a lot of things, and I am annoyed that I have to defend him from this, because this is just fucking stupid. What we've seen of Negan so far has been pretty promising. Put aside his bashing of heads in 701, and maybe Negan's not such a bad guy. Why would we put aside his bashing of heads, you moron? Why would we put aside him bashing the skulls in of some of the main characters? One of my personal favourites, Glenn. Why would I, as a viewer of this TV program where they are trying to hype up a bad guy for me to give me a legitimate emotional investment in seeing this guy fall, why would I put aside him doing this? He's actually shown a measure of restraint. He could have killed them all, and banters with more than a little charm. He'd certainly be a better dinner guest than the governor. Fucking, are you serious? The governor isn't likely at any time to go off the handle and bash someone's skull in. The governor had a front to maintain. He had a purpose. He was at least semi-rational. Negan is unhinged. That's the point. That's what's meant to make him scary. The governor was calculating and cold. That was what made him scary. And the idea that this is all okay because he didn't just kill them all just sounds to me like a little bitch talking. The governor, A, would have shown measures of restraint, but B, Negan showed restraint because it's directly in his self-interest. This is why he says, I want half your stuff, and then he says, I will define what half looks like, and then goes and takes whatever the fuck he wants, almost all of it, all of their guns, and leaves their food because he wants them alive, to get more things for him. He's turning them into serfs at best, slaves at worst. This is not a good situation. This is not him showing a measure of restraint. This is him putting them in chains. Negan's business plan seems lifted straight out of organised crime. Yes, he's a warlord. He's running a good old-fashioned protection racket. No, it's much worse than that. It's much worse than that. We'll take care of the walkers for you in exchange for weekly tribute. Yes, that is the fig leaf Negan is putting over it. And the point of him saying this is that he knows that's bullshit, you know that's bullshit, and the big shit-eating grin on his face shows you that he knows you know it's bullshit, and yet you're going to do it anyway, which is why he said to Rick, I just rammed my cock down your throat, and you said thank you. For fuck's sake, stop trying to make it look like Negan isn't such a bad guy. That's the point of Negan. He is such a bad guy. Assuming you have any pride or self-respect left, which the author of this article apparently doesn't. But what's so bad about that? If you're in the market for a good anti-hero, who doesn't love a good gangster? Negan is not an anti-hero. He is a villain. I don't know whether you've noticed, but we have had nothing from Negan that shows he is in any way redeemable. In fact, the point appears to be to show that he is beyond redemption. He is just an evil psychopath. But I absolutely love this. A reasonable recipe for an interesting Negan could be 1 part Sonny Corleone, 2 parts Paulie from Goodfellas, and a large dash of Tony Soprano. A criminal, sure, but an organised criminal. One who's mostly interested in business, even if he does fly off the handle now and again. Well, he is, but just to an absolutely irredeemable perspective. Instead, the Negan we get in 703 is basically a Donald Trump of the post-apocalypse. As we see him giving Dwight and the rest of his minions a pep talk of sorts, it becomes clear that Negan's just a demagogue. My fucking god. You are just beyond the pale. Look at the rhetoric Negan uses compared to the rhetoric Trump uses. Look at the results of Negan's rhetoric compared to the results of Trump's rhetoric. People don't flock to Negan, he forces them to do his bidding. Donald Trump packed out stadiums because he offered people hope. Now, I know what you're going to say. Jesus Christ, well, he's never going to follow through on any of this. No, he's not. Yeah, sure, it's all words. It's all words. But Donald Trump wasn't threatening people to make them do what he said, to make them come at his beck and call. They came because he had a message they liked. Negan has a message they don't like, but they are afraid of. These are the opposites. But it gets worse. Negan's enamored with the idea of torture and the practice of torture. We've seen what he does with Lucille, while Dwight's face has clearly seen the business end of an iron. As for Daryl, beating him and feeding him dog food would both be violations of the Geneva Convention, but it's that damned earworm of the song Easy Street that raises the level of the T-word. Okay, let's assume that Donald Trump was advocating for torture. As we've already established, this is not outside of the experience of the American establishment. But I think more importantly, we can charitably ascribe the motive to Trump, as he regularly says. We have no choice, folks. We have no choice. It's not that torturing people gives Donald Trump a hard-on. He doesn't do it personally, presumably. I mean, unless you actually think that he is going to get some sort of Middle Eastern dissidents in, get a bat out and start smashing them around with a gleeful look on his face because he gets off on that kind of thing, which is what Negan does. And the thing is, I'm really genuinely serious when I say that these people's principles are just wildly misaligned. To suggest that all of this, bashing their friends' heads in, enslaving them, torturing his subordinates, torturing other people that he's enslaved, no, this is not the worst thing that Negan has done. The real problem, however, is Negan's casual misogyny. Negan casually uses the same P word that got Trump into trouble. Although television production schedules being what they are, that's just a coincidence rather than a political statement. It's not just locker room talk. Negan fancies himself a star with the privileges that accrue the status. While he pays lip service to the idea of consent, he's created a world where women are chattel. And I see this article was written by Matt Binder.
Literally just maybe 100 or so years ago, 100 and such a few years ago, that women were still viewed as chattel.
You know, except for the parts where Negan isn't treating women like chattel, giving them the choice as to whether to be his wife or not, for some reason, which isn't something you would do to your own property. And again, like I've said, is something that would make him look worse by comparison. But I think the reason that Negan doesn't do this might be because of people like you, who think that is worse than murder. It's difficult to talk in absolutes and superlatives when it comes to The Walking Dead. This is a show that's shown cannibal barbecues and children being killed in cold blood. But somehow, when Negan half-jokingly offers Sherry back to Dwight, you want a little blast from the past with you-know-who, I fear we might have hit a new low. That's not a new low. That's not anywhere near the lowest of things that not only have been on the show, but Negan personally has done. I swear I didn't make this up, okay? For a brief shining moment, Negan promised to shake things up in a positive way. But by the end of the hour, that hope is gone. Fucking, what are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? It's okay to murder and kill and torture and enslave, as long as you're not being misogynist. You know, I mean, that's really the worst, isn't it? Like a certain politician, Negan may look and sound like a saviour to his followers, but it's obvious to anyone paying attention that he's nothing more than a different sort of monster. Because, in your opinion, Donald Trump and Negan are moral equivalents because they are both disrespectful to women. Honestly, this is your opinion. This is what you're saying to everyone, and this is why everyone thinks you're fucking nuts. Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Stupid for the 13th of November 2016. This week is going to be an important week's episode, and a lot of people have been telling me they've been waiting for this one. And I don't fucking blame them, because this is just incredible what has happened in the last week. It's amazing.
And when, because you were... Scott Adams, ladies and gentlemen, here we are.
Hey, Joe.
Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you again.
I met you decades ago.
Do you remember that
Yes.
horrible story?
I don't remember a horrible story, but it was on news radio. What was the horrible story?
Do you remember my humiliation that day?
No, what happened?
So for those of you who weren't with us on that set, I had a small line, just one line, on news radio because it was an episode that mentioned Dilbert. So
Right.
I was invited as a guest. And you were giving the line before my line. So I just came in and they said, Joe's going to say this. Joe, say your line. And you turned to me and you said your line. And they said, when he says that, you say your line. And of course I'm panicked because I don't do this, right?
Right.
I'm not an actor. So the scene starts, and it's one of these scenes that runs continuous from beginning to end. It's not like a movie where you cut it every 10 seconds, so you have to do it right all the way through.
Right.
And we get to my line, and you're turning the other direction. So the line I'm waiting to hear, instead of hearing it clearly, like in practice, when you were facing me, I hear, wah, 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 wah.
Oh, no.
And I think to myself, I don't know what his other lines are. So I don't know if that sounds like my line, or is that, should I go? I said to myself, 50-50 chance, right? I either ruin the scene by saying something the wrong time, or I ruin the scene by being silent when I should have been talking. So I said, I'm going to go with silent. And I just stood there in silence, and everybody got really quiet. I don't know if you remember what you did, but it's burned in my mind. You were very nice that day, but you just sort of slowly turned around and looked at me. And meanwhile, all the other actors sort of slowly turned around and looked at me because I was the source of the problem. And then, but I have to admit, I was impressed because then all the actors went back to square one and did the entire scene through again perfectly. I mean, it's very impressive if you're not an actor to watch how many lines a bunch of professionals can do without screwing up any of them. It was an awesome kind of an afternoon.
Well, news radio was a very unusual show in that we did there was a lot of changing stuff on the fly. Like the writers would come in and then rewrite a line like on the fly. Like they would do one line, they would do one take, and then Paul Sims, Josh Lieb, and all these guys would get together and they go, okay, that's let's try this. We'll go back. But then when Scott turns to you, now to say this, and then we'd have a totally new line for the next scene. And so we'd have to like be standing over by the elevator going, no, that's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. We do come up with a bunch of different ways to say it and then just run with it on the fly.
Oh, man.
You know?
People don't realize how hard that is.
It's not that hard, honestly. It's not coal mining.
Well, you have to have the right kind of mind for that
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when a musician can do, 50 songs from memory.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I could do 7 notes, and,
Right.
then I'm good. Like, that's all I could remember in a row. And after that, I'd just be guessing.
Well, if you think about just think about language itself, how many words you can access just instantaneously, just pull them up from your memory.
Yeah.
It's just that's what you do all the time. And if you all the time were reading sitcom scripts, you just get used to that sort of flow and how things go. It's not really that.
Everything looks difficult if you don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
People say that about my job as well. It's like, how do you do that? It's like,
Yeah.
well, it happens to be the one thing I can do well. And I can't do most things well, but one little thing I can do well.
Well, one thing that people have a hard time with the sitcom world, especially the old school sitcom world, is the audience. Like performing in front of the audience is a weird element. Did you feel that?
Well, I do tons of public speaking. So in that environment, I like the energy and I like all of it. But usually if I'm speaking, I know exactly what I'm going to say. And even if I mess it up, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be specific. But that was a frightening situation. So keep in mind also that most of the actors were stars. They were pretty big names, and so I was meeting everybody. So I was a little bit starstruck, and I was completely out of my element, and that completely blew the scene. Just me. It was like all me. There wasn't anybody else. It was just me.
Well, it sounds like I fucked up. Sounds like I was looking in the wrong direction, which is totally possible.
No, we were standing in line, so you had to be facing the way you were.
Oh, so I was looking at you during the rehearsal or something?
Yeah, the setup was we were standing in line to get coffee. And so during the practice, you turned to me, so I would know exactly what you were saying. But in the actual thing, we were in line, so you were talking to somebody else.
Right, I get it. Yeah, man, I don't remember that at all. It's so funny how like one person can remember something and it's like a big moment, and another person just go like, I just erased that. Well, I knew that I met you, and I remember, oh, Scott Adams is cool. I like that cartoon. And then all of a sudden, it's over. There's no other memories in my database.
Yeah, I had a totally different experience that day.
Well, it's also, I did 100 of them, or 98, or whatever the hell we did. So it's a weird thing as you get older, too. Like, there's memories that I just have scrubbed. I'm like, no room for them. I got new data coming in. I got to make some space. It's like cleaning out your garage,
So there's nothing scarier than getting together with your siblings after you haven't seen them for years, and you start talking about your childhood. And one of you will be telling a story like, you remember the time it doesn't matter what it is. Like, I jumped on a zebra and I ran across the zoo and they yelled at me. And the other sibling will say, that wasn't you. No, that was me. I was the one on the zebra. And it'll be such like a memory that you couldn't forget.
Right.
But you did. You actually wrote yourself into a scene. You weren't even there. You were watching. You wrote yourself into the hero scene.
That does happen with people.
Yeah.
The human memory is really flawed. It's really flawed.
Well, if you want to go real deep, real fast, you just gave me the good opium. I am a proponent of the we are all a software simulation view of reality, and that would also explain why memories are so screwed up. And the explanation would be that the past doesn't exist until you need it. In other words, the past writes itself on demand, because if we're software, you wouldn't have everything in the universe pre-programmed just in case you needed it. It would take too much resources.
I might have to spark up a joint for this episode. You just went real deep, real quick.
I was hoping it'd go that way.
Do you want some? Do you smoke the weed?
I could do it for the first time. I'd be willing to try it once.
Well, I don't know if I want to give it to you for the first time. I don't want you to freak out. You don't smoke pot at all?
The truth is, I've smoked pot once.
Ever?
It was in first day of college, but I never stopped. So that's really just once.
Oh, I understand. So you smoke pot all the time. So you did it once and you just kept going.
I'd be willing to try the second time, is what I'm saying.
So, what has life been like for Scott Adams during this election? You came into you're obviously always well known for being a creator of Dilbert, but along the selection cycle, all of a sudden I had people that I was in contact with that were saying, Scott Adams is a Trump supporter, and I was like, what? Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, is a Trump supporter? Because everyone assumes you meet someone and they're in the creative business. You're in a creative business. You write a comic strip. You would assume that you would be a left-wing guy, like almost immediately.
Well, I'm neither left nor right. I'm sort of all over the place. My views didn't match, either of the major candidates on anything.
So you're a free thinker.
I like to think I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
I like that too.
No, I'm actually, my larger philosophical grounding is informed by my experience as a hypnotist. I'm not sure if you knew that.
No, I didn't know you were a hypnotist.
So in my 20s, I went to hypnosis school and became an actually trained, certified hypnotist.
Wow.
And one of the things you learn as a hypnotist is that the world is backwards to the way people normally perceive it. So normally you see the world as, hey, 90% of the time people are rational and doing rational things.
Right.
But 10% of the time we just go nuts and we do stupid things, and it's because something happened this month, right? That's the normal view of the world. The hypnotist's view of the world is opposite. The hypnotist says that 90% of the time we're completely irrational, and we're just making rationalizations for why we did things after the fact. 10% of the time we're rational. That's only when there's no emotional content to the decision. You're balancing a checkbook or something, trying to pick up, the best route to someplace. And so that's how I see the world. So when I look at either the Trump supporters or the Clinton supporters, to me, from the hypnotist perspective, and someone who's studied persuasion for decades, I used it in my writing, I see both sides as completely ridiculous. Both of them are grounded in complete absurdities. They're just different.
Yeah.
But nobody knows why they're deciding. The real reasons that people make decisions are fear, identity, they have some aspiration, they've got something they're trying to solve. There's something they're trying to work out. But the reasons we give are usually completely false. And the grounding for this is that if you think about evolution, I assume you believe we evolved.
Yes.
There was no requirement in evolution that we ever understand our environment the way we imagine we do. And here's an example of that. You could believe that you were a monk, you're reincarnated from a 10th century monk.
Like Steven Seagal.
Does he believe that?
Yeah, he's like a Buddha or something.
From an actual...
Yeah, like he actually got it bestowed upon him by some Tibetan character.
All right, so let's use Steven Seagal. So Steven Seagal can be standing in a grocery store next to, let's say, a Muslim who believes that his prophet literally flew to heaven on a winged horse. Those two people don't live the same reality. But they both buy groceries, they both go, they cook it, they live, they survive. So it turns out that understanding your reality at an actual, I really know what is objectively happening and I get it, and I've got a mental model that's quite accurate. We don't need any of that. So it would be deeply unlikely that we evolved such a specific skill that's completely unnecessary as far as we can tell. We do need to know that if you run into this wall, your head is going to hurt. So there's some basic stuff. But we're probably all even interpreting that experience differently. So there's no reason to think that the way I think of it is the way you think of it. So I see the world as this big irrational ball, and I use the hypnotist persuader skills to back up and try to deduce, what's really driving things. And when people said I was a Trump supporter, what they meant was, they may have only seen part of what I was talking about. I was writing about his skill as a persuader. And what I mean is that I noticed in him the skills that I've developed over decades for persuasion, but at a higher level than I've ever seen, meaning that he's the most persuasive living human I've ever experienced. And I mean that in terms of actual technique. He's full of technique, and it's all the time. I'll give you some examples of that. First time I noticed it was the very first debate when Megyn Kelly was asking him the question about the insults he had allegedly said to women. Not allegedly, he said them. And this is a setup that any other politician with this setup is totally trapped. Because they can either try to deny they said it, and then somebody has a videotape and that doesn't work. Or they can say, oh, I didn't mean it. There's almost nothing you can say. You're just trapped. And that would have been the end of his campaign. First debate should have been over. And if you remember, do you remember what he said?
No, I don't.
She said, you said this, this, and this about women. And he smiled. And he sort of looked at the audience, it looked like, or the camera. And he said, only Rosie O'Donnell. And the audience erupted in laughter. Completely unexpected, out of place, inappropriate, provocative. And what I noticed was that Rosie O'Donnell is a visual image that everybody shares, right? You got a picture of her, since I said her name. And for his base that he was catering to, it was an unpopular image and one that would just suck all the energy away from the question, which was toxic. And really, you can't touch the question. You just have to suck all the energy into another part of the room and wait for the time to run out. And that's what he did. And it became the headline, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Certainly it highlighted the things he said about women maybe more than it would have. But the way he escaped that got my attention. And I thought, that doesn't look normal. All right, that's operating at another level. And so I looked for more examples. And you can see it everywhere. And it was especially clear by the time he started saying, well, the other visual things he does is he says, build a wall. And you can just imagine a wall. When he says, we're paying too much ransom to Iran for those soldiers, he says, we paid 400 million or whatever the number is. He goes, imagine that money piled up. It'd be so much money, it'd fill this room. You can't even imagine that big pile of money. He always goes for the visual. Because we know that the visual part of our brain is the dominant part. And if you can get its attention and get it on your message, it talks the rest of your brain into anything you want it to. When he talks about ISIS, he goes visual also. He doesn't say they are bad people whose religions, has been distorted, the type of thing you might hear from Hillary Clinton. He says they put you in cages and they drown you in the cage. They chop your head off. I mean, you can see that. You're playing a movie in your head. So everything he does gets more attention than everything everybody else does because he puts it into a provocative picture. So that was the first thing I noticed. Then when he got to Jeb Bush, and he needed to defeat Jeb because he was the strongest competitor, so if he couldn't get past him, there was no point. And he went after him strong, and he went after him fast, and he went after him with a low-energy kill shot. That's why I call these linguistic kill shots. It's not just an insult. It's not just a clever nickname. And we saw Clinton try to come up with clever nicknames that had no purchase whatsoever, like Dangerous Donald. It just didn't work. But look at low-energy Jeb. Here's how it's engineered. It's engineered for confirmation bias, meaning that you want the future to make this look like a better nickname every day. And you want it to match his physicality. So before I ever heard low-energy Jeb, I had a good impression of Jeb Bush. Like, I thought, when you looked at Jeb Bush, didn't you say to yourself, this guy looks like a cool character? Like,
No.
No, but he looked like he was an in control, calm, reasonable, exactly the person you'd want if the nuclear question came up, if there was some big decision. Jeb Bush isn't going to get excited about it.
He seemed like a competent CEO.
Competent CEO, exactly. And as soon as Trump said low energy, could you see him any other way? He was low energy, and he will always be low energy.
And Lion Ted.
No, Lion Ted.
Lion Ted was beautiful.
Lion Ted, because you knew that because he's a politician.
Yeah.
Sometime in the next several months, he's going to say stuff that you can say is a lie, whether it is or not. That's
Right.
just the
Doesn't
game.
have to.
But more importantly, Ted has a physicality about him. Now, unfortunately, he's got beady eyes. And I've said this before, that if you're going to cast a movie, say,
Yeah.
oh, we need a guy who looks dishonest,
Right.
it would be his face.
Right.
And unfortunately, I don't know if he's actually dishonest. I'm not going to make a judgment. So
Who came up with the Zodiac Killer thing? Was that a Trump fan, or was it Trump himself that started saying that Ted was the Zodiac Killer?
I think that probably started with a fan. But so the other thing that
was fucking harsh, man. He'd be giving speeches. Are you the Zodiac Killer? People would scream it out. Like, imagine having to deal with that.
and did your father kill, somebody?
Yeah. His father was, maybe his dad was the Zodiac Killer. Is that what because the Zodiac Killer was like the 70s, right? Might not be old enough.
So
Crooked Hillary.
Crooked Hillary, same thing. So,
Crooked Hillary's a brilliant one.
So she wasn't physically, as limber as a young person. So you could imagine her sort of a little bit crooked physically. And you knew that there would be stories coming out in which people could say, well, there's another example of that crookedness.
Did you see, but you thought of that in a physical sense, like the way she looked? All I thought about is corruption. I heard Crooked Hillary. I saw her like with like a burglar's mask on, trying to sneak away with bags that had dollar signs on them. You know? That's what I saw.
If you look at any one of these individually, his nicknames, you could say, well, it's sort of random, he just got lucky. But if you look at them all, they all have that physicality, they all have the priming, so that your confirmation bias will kick in. Whatever you see after that will just fit the label because it's the first thing you think
Well,
of.
he's a performer. You can say Donald Trump is a businessman. He most certainly is. He most certainly is a real estate investor. But he's been a public figure for decades. And when you're a public figure, you're a performer. He's performing all the time. And he's also, he likes to win, And so when he's engaging people, he makes it personal. So he's gotten very good at what's called playing the dozens. You know what playing the dozens is?
Tell us.
It's a insult thing. You know, like you can, like one guy, like guys in the hood, in the inner cities. It started out as a black term, but it's essentially like a version of a your mama contest. Like some guys are way better at your mama jokes. They're way better at playing the dozens. They're way better at shitting on other people around them, and it's for the entertainment of each other. It's a huge thing amongst comedians. We shit on each other constantly, left and right, but it's generally encouraged, and we all enjoy it, you know? But when a guy has decades and decades and decades of this, like Donald Trump, at a very high level, because he's known to be a billionaire investor who puts his name on everything, and he's got the wacky hair. It's almost like he has the wacky hair to invite it in. It's like the whole thing is it's very clever in that way. And then he's really good at talking shit. You know, he's really good at people saying something to him, deflecting whatever criticism and shitting on them, because he's just got a ton of practice.
So he's also the master of what I call the talent stack. So I wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, in which I talk about developing systems for succeeding. And one of the systems is to, and you do this too, stack together what I would call ordinary skills until your stack is different than anybody else's. So in my case, I'm not a great artist. You know, I didn't take any writing courses, but I'm pretty good at drawing and I'm pretty good at writing and I'm a little bit funny. So I put them together and I can do a comic strip, because it's rare that you get somebody who's, let's say, in the top 10% of 3 different things. But it's not hard to be in the top 10% of things if you're going after them. So if you look at Trump, he wrote a book on negotiating. So he knows business, he knows negotiating, he knows public speaking, he has a sense of humor, a really good one. He's quick on his feet. Now he knows politics, you know, from both the inside and the outside. He knows Twitter. If you know, I could probably go on, and you would say if you looked at any one of those things, he's not the best you've ever seen. You know, he's not the best public speaker, the funniest person, etc. But there aren't many people who can do all of those things in the top 10%.
But as a public speaker, I don't think he's nearly in the top 10%. I think he's, I mean, I'm just being honest. I think he has very poor efficiency of words. Like he repeats himself when it's not really important. And when he repeats itself, what I usually see is like someone searching for the next thing to say. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll say, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay? I'm going to be honest with you here. He'll do that in a way that it's not efficient.
It's not efficient, but it's persuasive, and that's why he does it.
Sometimes, but it also...
No, repetition. Repetition is persuasive.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's clunky.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of times where it's his style to do that, and he's done it before. But even like in delivering lines, you've got to know when to not talk. Like here's a perfect example. When he said that he called the president of Mexico up, and they had the conversation about the wall, and he said the wall just got 10 foot higher. He's like, yeah, that's what I said. That is what I said. Like he repeats that stuff. He should have just let it hang. He should have just said the wall just got 10 foot higher. They would have went crazy, and he could have walked back and forth and just sucked it in. But he kept talking. See, that's not the best speaker. Like Obama, I feel, is a way better public speaker. Way more efficient with his words. Way better control of the sentences that he speaks. But it's more professional.
I think you're judging on a standard that I probably wouldn't use. So I took the Dale Carnegie course, teaching you how to be a public speaker. And their course taught you zero technique. It was a course on public speaking in which they taught you nothing about technique. The things that you're saying he's doing.
Not necessarily technique.
Well, let me just finish this
Okay,
up.
sure, I'm sorry.
What they taught you was just confidence. And if you were happy and confident, you would almost always do well. Even if you make a mistake, you just correct. So he strikes me as the confident Dale Carnegie type of speaker, the person who's selling an emotion. Mm-hmm. All right, it's an experience. You're not going there really to get information. It's not really, you know, well-crafted jokes you're looking for. You're going there to feel something, and you can't deny that 30,000 people in a stadium with red hats on, you know, they were feeling something. So in terms of delivering an emotion, top 10%.
Interesting. Well, I think that absolutely one thing you could say is he knows how to do the Donald Trump thing. And the Donald Trump thing is very different than the rest of the politicians' thing. Right. The Donald Trump thing is not humble. The Donald Trump thing will tell you about his past successes and use them to tell you how he's going to be successful in the future. The Donald Trump thing, when confronted with certain things, like the thing about him saying something about Hillary lacking stamina, and then he goes off about having a winning temperament. I have a winning temperament. There's not a lot of people who could do that in that sort of a political form. Like if say Mitt Romney was running for president, he started saying, I have a winning temperament. They'd be like, oh, Mitt's gone fucking crazy, right? I mean, you remember how Howard Dean got knocked out of the race just for screaming? He just screamed at a rally, and it was over. The wind came out of the balloon.
But you know what Howard Dean did wrong?
What?
He only screamed once.
Ooh,
It's all about contrast.
Well, he also didn't make fun of it. You know, he should have come on and he should have done something to make fun of it. He should have had a speech where he talked about, so I got a little carried away, folks. You know, like he hid from it.
It feels like he could have fixed that.
Yes,
Yeah, I had that. I
for
had that feeling
sure.
at the time.
Well, the problem was it was contrary to what he was selling. You know, he was selling this buttoned-up package deal, and in the middle of that package deal is a fucking pro wrestling fan screaming from a suplex. You know, like Hulk Hogan suplexes the Iron Sheik, and I mean that's what it was like. I mean that's not the guy who you want to have the button.
So, have you heard of these studies? And I think this has been replicated and fairly reliable. That if you want to addict somebody to something, let's say this, your show, if you gave them a really good product every time, it actually wouldn't be as addictive as if once in a while it wasn't good and they had to sort of like wait and anticipate, oh, there's that good one again.
Right.
So unpredictable rewards are far more addicting than predictable. So Hillary Clinton, who rewards you every time, but it's just about the same, is not going to be nearly as addicting as Donald Trump, who disappoints the fuck out of you. You're like, God, I was just starting to like you. Why did you say that way?
Right.
And then 2 weeks later, he comes out with something you say, shit, I love you again. And, so he's got that addictive pattern going.
Well, I'll tell you what. Once all that grab the pussy stuff got out of the way, he was doing a lot of speeches in the rundown the last few days. And I watched a few of them on television because I've almost felt like, even though I knew I was going to vote, I almost felt like some sort of a spectator. Like this cannot possibly be real, to speak to your software simulation idea in the beginning that a lot of people share, by the way. It's not just crazy Scott Adams and me, but there's a lot of folks out there that think that we're living in a simulation, right? But as he would give these speeches, and there were some of the speeches he gave where there was these moments, and you're like, if someone could tell that guy to keep it at 7, like where he's at right there, and talk like that always, and avoid all the crazy shit. But man, the crazy shit is what you get. Like that's the thing about people like Trump or like any powerful super dominator type character like that. You're going to have some flaws, a lot of them.
Look what he kept saying all the time. He was always saying he was the energy guy, look at my crowds. The other one has no stamina. This one's, low energy. He knew the facts didn't matter. He knew the policy didn't matter. And by the end, I think everybody agrees they didn't. I mean, by election day, not a lot of people were saying, well, I sure like that TPP stand. I mean, nothing like that was happening.
There was no issues. No issues.
It just came down to which one you hated the more.
Well, there was one issue, though, that was real, and that was amongst feminists. There was amongst women who were willing to exonerate Hillary on all the weird shit that she had ever done involving women, all the stuff that she had done involving deleted emails, and and I had heard people even say that people were giving her a hard time because she's a woman on her health. And I was like, you are out of your fucking mind if you believe that. She's falling asleep when she's standing up. That is bad. That is so bad. If that was anyone close to me, I'd be like, you're not going to be president. We got to get you healthy. You're fucking blacking out while you're standing up. And it's not just once. She fell down once in 2012, got a serious concussion, and was fucked up for 6 months. Me, as a person who's terrified of brain trauma, that freaks me the fuck out because I know the repercussions of brain trauma. I know the impulsiveness that it bestows upon people. It's a horrible curse that happens. It's happened to a lot of people I know.
Right.
So I knew there was this weird delusional thing where people didn't want to address the fact that her health is poor. And then it was revealed in one of the WikiLeaks emails that she had suffered from some sort of not a stroke, but a seizure in 2015. Like, that's a fucking year ago. Like, what is happening? Like, you got to... but nobody wanted to talk about that. And there was this strange air that she's not being treated fairly. I'm like, here's treated fairly. She is a person who deleted 30,000 emails after she got a subpoena. She's an older, rich white woman. If she was a 40-year-old black guy and she deleted 30,000 emails after a subpoena, they would just shoot you.
Right.
They would just come over to they would kick down your fucking door and cuff you and drag you off to a cage somewhere.
So how weird
Boy,
is
am
it?
I a right winger? What's going on here?
How weird is it that we went through that entire election cycle, and so many people like you and like me were saying, I'm not sure she looks healthy enough.
She's definitely not
Now-
healthy.
Now, she of course met all the standards of past presidents, but what person ever interviewed her and said, look, there are a lot of questions about your health, and asked the question this way: can you look the American public in the eye and tell us there's no major health problems that you haven't disclosed?
I would never ask her a question like that because I don't think she'd ever give you a real answer. The same way with the FBI.
But you could tell by the way she evaded it whether she was lying.
She's a wizard at that, though. That's
No.
her shit. That's her
No.
shit, man. That red cape, whoosh, where the bull just goes flying by. Wah!
You know how you can always tell a liar. Liars will say something like, so if you said to me, Scott, have you ever had any major health problems? I'd say, I have met all the requirements of the presidency. I'd say, oh, no. I'm asking you a specific question. Is there anything not disclosed? And then I say, Donald Trump hasn't disclosed any more than I've disclosed. That's a person who's hiding something.
Right.
Otherwise, they look you right in the eye and they go, I swear, I'm great. You know, everything's good. I promise you, nothing's going to come out later when I'm president. You will not be disappointed in any way. Because nobody can say that if they think they're going to get bitten in the ass in a year and a half when they collapse on the White House lawn.
My point was in saying that is that if you anyway described her health issues, that you would somehow be a sexist, and that the idea of her gender and being the first female president, which obviously would be very historic, right? Huge issue, huge honor. That was a part of what they were voting for. It became a part. Her gender became a part of what they were voting for,
Well-
and so that was an issue.
Let me give you the positive spin on the same topic. CNN published 24 pundit explanations of why Trump won unexpectedly. 24 different theories about why we didn't see it coming. In the top 24, none of them were, she's a woman, so couldn't get
Right.
elected. Not in the top 24. All right. So if we may pause for a moment from piling on Ms. Clinton, I got to say that the whole breaking the glass ceiling thing, she fucking did that. That's toast. There's no 6-year-old born today who says a woman can't be president. That's not even in their world.
That's
because
so not true. I'll find you 5, 6-year-olds to say it right to your face.
I'll bet not.
I get a bunch of them together. Can a woman be president? I get some boys together. I give them candy, high five them. You can trick them.
That's true.
You know?
Talk wise into anything for candy. That's true.
I mean, I know what you're saying, though. I know what you're saying. That she got as close. She won the popular vote, right? As far as the current count.
Right, but who are you seeing saying, oh, if it was sexism that didn't get her elected?
Feminists that I know. I mean, there's a lot of people that actually believe that. And you know what, man? There's a whole spectrum of variables. And if someone's thinking about, if they're hovering over, if they're looking at Gary Johnson and Hillary Clinton, maybe they're like never Trump. Maybe they're one of those people. They're like one of these motherfuckers going to get my vote. They might start thinking, man, I don't know if I want a woman president. That's absolutely a factor.
Have you heard anybody say that?
Yes.
And what do they say? Do they?
A friend of mine.
And
She's
what-
a yoga instructor.
It's a woman. Saying.
She goes, bitches are crazy. I don't want a woman running this country. That's for real. That's a real statement. I mean, that's a human being who was just talking to me, and we're friends, and no one was around.
And do you think that she would vote on that?
Yes. I think there's many people that would vote on that. But there's many people that will like, fuck this man. I don't care what Hillary did. I don't care if Hillary's got a bunch of rape victims buried in her backyard. That's a woman. She represents women. And probably Donald's got more. You know, there's that attitude too. There's a lot of people that would only vote for a woman if given the chance.
Yeah, so I don't know how you'd net it down, because I think it was a net positive. Don't
There's
you think?
300 million people in this country, plus Mexicans. I don't think you really can net it down like that. I just think there's too many of us. I think that's one of the things that we learned from this really important lesson when it comes to polls. They're not real anymore. They're not real. You're not talking to me. You're not answering polls. Jamie doesn't answer a goddamn poll. Look at him. No
So-
one you know answers polls. It's such a small sampling of people, and the people that answer polls, they don't have anything better to do than answer a fucking poll, right?
There's
That's
always
not
that-
good.
yes, it's a jury duty problem.
Yeah, it's exactly what the problem is. So I think we learned that definitively. These polls do not work.
Well, if I could defend Nate Silver for a moment.
Who's Nate Silver? Who's
so
that guy again?
He does 538, the website, best statistician on
Okay.
politics.
Well, it's not his fault. He just worked with the data he has.
Well, but he was also within 2% of it.
Was he?
Yeah, so
pretty good.
so at the end, well, they always converge toward the end. They start out wildly ridiculous, and then when it's clear that it's going to be one way or the other, all the polls start coming toward the end because they want to say, well, at the end, I was only 2% off.
Jamie and I were watching this video clip of the Young Turks calling down the election yesterday, and at the beginning of it, they were 100% convinced that Hillary could not lose. There was one guy who was saying, Hillary can't lose. Like literally, it's mathematically impossible. And then by the end, they were fucking screaming and swearing. It was like, wow, these numbers that people count on. Like 84% say this, 15% say. Okay, well,
Try to imagine my life. I don't know if you know this, but a year ago, more than a year ago, I predicted that Trump would win with a 98% certainty in a landslide. Win it all. I was one of the few people who said it early.
and this is because of the way he was so persuasive.
Yeah, just based on his talent, not.
But this was
policies.
pre the Rosie O'Donnell thing. If it was a year ago.
I think it was over the summer that it was like August last year that
Well,
the first debates were.
I think you're right, but that wasn't a year ago, right? That was a little bit more than a year ago. Whatever, we're splitting hairs then.
Okay. So back then, when I predicted it, you can imagine the heat I took because it was such an unlikely pick, and how many people just wanted to dance on my grave for being wrong,
And they're angry at you.
and angry. Yes, going to going over to Amazon, getting bad book reviews because they didn't like what I said about Donald Trump. So that moment when I find out that I haven't wasted my whole year, because it would have been a terrible year to be so wrong for a year, and then there's like no payoff whatsoever. It was like the worst gamble ever.
Right.
Bad risk management. But then to have it come through just the way I predicted it, was this amazing moment. You only get a few of those in your life.
Well, he did really win by a landslide. So that you were off by that. That's it.
Small electoral landslide.
Yeah. Oh,
And-
electoral. Yeah, I guess
and-
so.
and
Right?
what-
Electoral, he won by quite a few points, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was pretty close up until how many hours in? As soon as we started.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Here's the thing that I think it's important to make a distinction, and this is what I recognize on you when I watch some of your periscopes. And you just weren't making a moral judgment of him as a person, and that's what people expected. People expected a line in the sand to be drawn morally. What you were doing was talking about all of his traits. You were compounding all of his positive traits and what he does well. And then people got mad at you for bringing, like, you're analyzing it. Like, say if you're a scientist and you take a plant that you find in the Amazon, you're like, well, what does this plant consist of? Let's break down the parts. You were kind of breaking down the parts of what he does and what he's effective. And it didn't seem to me, I'm like, this doesn't seem like a guy who's like, there's a few guys out there that are like rabid, rah-rah Trump supporters. And some of them where it's super transparent. There's a few guys out there that I'm watching them and I know what they're doing. What they're doing is they're latching onto the Trump train. They're latching on like really shamelessly, where they tweet about Trump all the time now, but they never give a fuck about him a while ago. Like over the last 6 months, they've jumped on this because they recognize there's a tremendous amount of loyalty and momentum behind being a Trump supporter and a fan, because it's a tough stance to take. So guys that are already marginalized, they're already kind of like fringe, and people think they're kind of maybe creepy. They're like, fuck this, I'm going full creep. And they jump right in. It's real transparent. It's interesting. Obviously that's just my take on it. They might actually be really Trump supporters, and they're super excited. But I sense some disingenuous behavior out there.
Yeah, I think-
Careful, Trump train. You might have some hobos on your fucking wagons.
I think what's different about this election and about Trump in particular is that it used to be we were electing a leader, right? Someone who would be a role model and all that. I think he threw that all out the door, and social media throws even more out the door. And what I mean is, I think the public is the leader. I mean, I think no laws get passed unless the majority of the public wants it to get passed. Anything that gets a little out of line, social media just throws it back in line. And more than ever, I think we hired an employee rather than a leader. I feel like I hired a plumber, someone who's just really good at a specific set of skills, negotiating, maybe doing something with the budget, whatever needs to be done, secure the borders. But it's sort of like, picking a lawyer. I don't care what he's doing in his personal life. He's not my role model. And by the way, which of our kids are looking to 70-year-old men as their role models anyway? I mean, I don't know if that happens a lot anyway. But I think he really is going to be the first sort of people's president. You see his policies changing in real time. The example we talked about earlier, when he misspoke and he said women should be punished if they get an illegal abortion. It turns out that the law and both Republicans and Democrats think that's crazy because it would discourage, would encourage the wrong behavior, and so only the doctor is punished. But you saw him change his opinion in 24 hours just by being a little more informed and hearing that the public was all on the same side.
So that's interesting. So he'll bend with the breeze, and you're not going to call it flip-flopping, which is what the common political term is, right?
Right. In the political realm, it would be flip-flopping, and he has no moral backbone.
But you're saying it's receptive to the public's desires.
He's a business person. In the business realm, it's more like A/B testing, which is you're rapidly testing things, you see what the response is, and you adjust if you don't get the right response.
But that's also like one of the criticisms of him is that he talks off the cuff without really having researched or thought deeply about these subjects. And when you're talking about a guy who's supposed to be the leader of the greatest country the world's ever known, like that guy should probably not do that.
I'm going to put a different filter on that.
Okay.
From the persuasion filter.
Oh, here we go.
Since facts and logic and policies and stuff don't matter as much as you want, when you see him ignoring things that you just think, man, a reasonable person would not say that, a reasonable person would not ignore that. He ignores things because they don't matter. You think he's ignoring something very important and he would perform better if he did what you imagine is the right way to act. I don't think so.
You don't think it's important to not arrest women who get illegal abortions?
No, I'm saying...
But you know what I'm saying? Like, that's an important thing to pay attention to, right? If you have an opinion on it.
Well, what I'm saying is that the things you would need to know to be a president.
Okay.
And let's say Hillary Clinton knows them all. Let's say she's a 10 out of 10 of just knowledge. If he's a 6, which probably is even generous, there probably isn't any decision that he won't have advisors or filling in.
I see.
It becomes informed as he needs to know, exactly the way a CEO would run something.
Okay, so this is not really related to that one particular subject.
No, that was just an example of him.
I understand what you're saying.
Changing when he became more informed.
It's not called bullshitting?
No, and here's how it's different. What he does is he agrees with people emotionally first. He gets you on your side emotionally. So if you're really concerned about immigration, for example, he doesn't just say, yeah, I'm concerned about that too. That would be sort of a Hillary Clinton approach, being less concerned than you are, but I got other priorities. He's way more concerned than you are. If you're a little bit worried about immigration, he's worried about ISIS coming over here and putting people in cages and cutting off heads, and my God, there's a hordes coming over the border. So he's so on your side that when he changes toward the middle, and you knew he had to, because you have to do that when you get in the general election, that his side was not feeling betrayed because they're saying, well, if he's changing the specifics of his policy, it must be because he looked into it, and that's what's practical.
That's interesting.
That's what's practical. So they're willing to go with him if they feel that he's on their side emotionally. So he always sides with people emotionally, goes as big as possible, uses hyperbole. He says he does that. And he also gives them room to negotiate back to the middle, and everybody says, my God, I'm happy now you're negotiating back to the middle.
Wow, that's interesting. It's interesting, but why do I feel like he's just getting lucky? I feel like he's dealing with really shitty competition. Hillary Clinton is a terrible example of someone who should be running the country in so many ways, and she beat him in the popular vote. You know what I mean? She's got a lot of dirt on her.
So she beat him in the contest they weren't having. There was only one contest.
That's true.
And he won that one.
That's true. What's hilarious is in 2012, he was saying it was a rigged system because of that contest. He was talking about the popular vote, and how was it? What year was it where it went to Al Gore? What year was it where Al Gore won the popular vote? Or was it? Did Kerry win the? No, Kerry never won the popular vote, right? It was just Al Gore. Al Gore won the popular vote
against Bush. Right?
Yeah, by like 500,000.
Yeah. So every year there's going to be this conversation anytime the vote is
Right.
close. But what you see is that Trump doesn't care about, let's say, the consistency, or what somebody would say is being a hypocrite. I tweeted this recently, that the least persuasive thing you could ever say in politics if you're trying to change somebody's mind is, that person's a hypocrite. In all of history, that's never changed anybody's mind. Nobody ever said, "Oh, slap my hand." I
Well,
didn't realize that happens on both
you mean
sides.
about a politician?
About a politician? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we accept a certain amount of bullshit.
But we also accept that they used to say one thing and now they say another, and it just seems so normal. It's in the baseline.
Don't you think that being the president is an impossible job? It's impossible. It just doesn't seem like anybody can really do it.
It's both impossible and the easiest job, in the sense that the office of the president and all the advisors and all the public opinion is going to force you down to just a few possible options. And those two options you will not have enough information to know which one's better. So anybody guessing among the last two options that they've narrowed it down to, there's a little bit of luck involved, I got to say.
And how so? What do you mean by this?
Well, you have to match the personality and the time, right? So
Right.
You could have a president who is just terrific in wartime, but weren't much good in anything else. So they'd be, next thing you know, they're on Mount Rushmore. But you have Obama, whose primary job was winding down two wars and basically cleaning up another mess and keeping us from a larger problem, the economy melting down. So Obama is really the presidency of things he prevented that could have been worse. But I would put him in the top 20% of presidents. So my view of him is very positive. And I think even Obamacare is a genius, persuasive move, even in its failure, because he set it up that way. And he said that publicly. He said, I'm going to launch it ugly. I'm paraphrasing. Didn't get exactly what I wanted in this law. But once it's out there, it'll be impossible for politicians to pull back coverage. They'll just have to fix it. So where are we today? Everybody's saying, Obama, total failure without Obamacare. Because we're going to keep the good parts, keywords, keep the good parts, exactly as he fucking planned. And said so publicly. He said it. He said it publicly. He said, I'm going to do this ugly, wrong, and you're going to have to fix it because it's going to be the only choice you have. And that's what Trump's going to do. He's going to fix it.
So what is he going to fix?
Probably he's going to keep the main parts and probably shift some money around from something. I'm not sure that fix looks like a miracle fix. I don't know that that's in our future. And I'm no expert on Obamacare.
Well, there's this weird thing that we've done now with Trump that I've never seen before, where we've narrowed him down to chants and slogans. I talked in this podcast about I was in New York City at the time of the protests. I was there for the UFC. And we were walking from the gym to the hotel, and we just got caught in this wave of people screaming with really fucking crazy signs, man. There wasn't a whole lot of love and compassion on their signs. We were talking about this before the podcast started, that the left has become something very different. It's like this really aggressive, insulting, shaming, and even the call for violence. Like there's people with rape Melania signs. It's like, this is crazy. Yeah, there's pictures of them online.
So the big question is, since I have one foot in the alt-right world, because I sample everything over there, but I'm also watching CNN and regular media, and these folks live by Soros. And by the way, I'm not saying this. I'm saying what their view is. On the other side, people think it's a true grassroots movement, and so the view is completely two different worlds.
Well, there may very well be some people that have been paid to protest, but there is absolutely a bunch of people that are protesting because they're upset. They might be fluffed up a little bit. I don't know. But there's definitely people that are just young people that are pissed off, or old people that are pissed off. There's people that are just upset.
The question was whether the protests would have lasted and spread and been as well organized.
Oh, love a good protest, Scott Adams. It's fun. You feel like you're doing something. You're blocking Wilshire. Fuck you. People, this guy, what I was saying about it boiled down to a slogan. Like there's a bunch of, not my fucking president, like that kind of shit. Like Donald Trump, KKK. Like they want to like yell out things that they associate with him, which I've never seen before.
So here's
about
why.
a president.
Yeah, so I write about this extensively. So the best persuasion is fear, right? So in the beginning of the election, Trump had the best persuasion because he was saying, the terrorists are coming in, I'll stop them. There's criminals coming across the border. Clinton was talking boring policies and, hey, I'm experienced. So she didn't have a chance against, you're going to die tomorrow.
Right.
By summer, she obviously had some professional help, meaning somebody who's a cognitive scientist or a professional persuader. And she started using the term dark all the time, and all the surrogates used it at the same time. Oh, it's dark, dark, dark. And she started coloring him as a huge racist, dictator, dangerous to the world, and the most dangerous thing in the world. Because if you're worried about terrorism, you're really worried about somebody else getting killed. Because you're not really thinking you get killed by a terrorist. Even if it's pretty bad, somebody else is getting killed. But Clinton painted a picture to make you afraid of the nuclear holocaust created by Trump tweeting something at 3 a.m. and hitting the button accidentally. And so that was the ultimate fear. So she really had that going. So and when she lost, she had all these people activated who would have been instantly deactivated if Trump had lost. But there's no deactivation on the bomb then. She created this societal bomb that is these protests and the way people feel. These people literally believe that Hitler was just a version of Hitler who will. And I actually saw today a journalist talking about concentration camps and that sort of thing. I believe nothing even remotely like that's going to happen, or I would obviously be on the side of the protesters. So it's not their view of the world is that the Trump supporters know he's a racist, and they installed him because they want him to go do racist things. Trump supporters know that even within their ranks, it's like 2% of people are actual racists, and I've never met one, like the hardcore kind. I've never met one.
I bet we could introduce you to some people if we just asked around.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be hard to find one.
Yeah.
But
Alonzo Bowden had a very funny line. He said, "Not all Trump supporters are racists, but all racists are Trump supporters."
So what we have here is a situation where the racists are living in their own little world, and they think they actually, got their guy.
Right.
Most Trump supporters, just like, hey, less taxes, they're thinking they like his personality, they'll just like something about him. And the Clinton supporters think that Hitler actually got elected. So they're acting on that. So what's happened is that Clinton has, somewhat accidentally, because she thought she was going to win, at which point this whole problem goes away, somewhat accidentally created this gigantic societal bomb that there's no way to diffuse. But a number of people, including me, are trying to figure out how to literally de-hypnotize people who are in this illusion that World War III just started.
Whoa. It was very disturbing to me. One of the big ones was when she was confronted about the DNC hack and her emails and all that stuff, the hacked emails from her server, where she diverted attention by saying that it was Russia that did this and that there would be repercussions, and then she said even possibly militarily. Like, that's the worst diffusion of responsibility ever. Like, we're talking about you deleting emails after a subpoena, and your argument is that the Russians got those emails and we should bomb them. I mean, that's literally what she's saying. That was crazy when she said there would be repercussions militarily to fucking Russia. Like, what Russia? We're not talking about invading Puerto Rico. It's fucking Russia. Like, you're saying there's going to be military invasions because someone stole your email that wasn't secure.
I'm going to defend her.
Please do.
I'm going to surprise you a little bit.
Oh boy, here we go. We should have a drink. Do you drink?
I don't anymore.
Ed, anymore? When'd you stop?
It just gave me sinus problems, so I stopped several years ago.
Okay.
I feel much healthier.
All right, dude. No pressure.
What was I talking about?
You were going to defend Hillary Clinton because I was saying that we were going to attack Russia because of emails is kind of crazy.
So the way leaders talk with each other is, this is my red line. Don't do this. This is serious. That's not the same as saying, if you got my email, I'm going to bomb you tomorrow.
Right.
There's a certain amount of seriousness which you must convey, which is separate from what you're actually going to do.
Agreed.
So she was conveying a 10 out of 10 maximum code red seriousness if you got my fucking emails, and it changed the course of our republic, because that's what she was alleging. Now I don't know if any of this happened, and there are smart people who said maybe the Russians were in, or some Russian hackers were involved. Or
Well,
something.
here's the problem. There's no evidence that the Russians did it. Not only that, the FBI and the CIA don't think the Russians did it. Like, it wasn't something that there was any definitive proof. It was, find out who, Jamie, see if you could pull this up. Who believed that it was Russia and who didn't believe it was Russia? Because there was some, like, very prominent security people that were hired to investigate. Zero evidence it was Russia. So it was just a diffusion. And you could tell that it was a planned diffusion because of that White House Correspondents' Press dinner. She made a joke about riding a horse with Putin. Like, she made this Russian joke. So there's this, like, theme, and it was a shit joke too. Whoever wrote it should be slapped. It was terrible. Like, the way it was set up it was like, if somebody pitched that around the joke writers table, you know, it was Tony Hinchcliffe and, you know, Jeff Rosser, they'd be like, no, that one's not going to make it.
Don't do that.
That's a terrible joke. It's just not a good joke. And she, you know, didn't know how to deliver it either. And it was just a clunky extra attempt to connect Putin and Trump because people are scared of Russia. But it was so shitty and ham-handed that it just didn't work. And everybody knows there's no fucking evidence. I mean, there's no evidence that Russia's doing anything. None.
I think the Russia thing took her from, you know, serious statesperson, you know, the most experienced person who ever ran for president, to a little bit ridiculous.
Yes. She got desperate.
I suppose.